Welcome to Dirt Road Discussions, the podcast where we're all about agriculture all the time, broadcasting from the Idaho Farm Bureau Federation headquarters. We introduce you to people from all over the country who are keeping agriculture growing strong. Whether you're a seasoned farmer or just someone curious about where your food comes from, you're in the right place. So let's take a journey down the dirt road.
Hey friends, welcome to the podcast that always polls well, Dirt Road Discussions. I'm your host, Cam Hammond. Ott Clark is the co-host of Dirt Road Discussions, and he is here with me once again. Ott, how are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm very good.
Yeah, we have a special episode today, and I'm pretty excited about it. So, Ott, I got a feeling that people are going to definitely vote for this episode once they hear it. What do you think?
Yeah, top-notch episode right here.
Absolutely. So to you, the listener, thanks so much for spending some time with us. We appreciate you riding along, whether you're in the cab of a tractor or checking cows or just trying to dodge the potholes on a dirt road somewhere. So if you enjoy what you hear, be sure to subscribe and check out our past episodes as new ones drop every other Tuesday. All right, Ott, I heard that you are a pretty civic-minded individual. Is that correct?
You bet.
Are you one that gets out there and votes every chance you get?
I get out there and vote as much as I can. You bet. Sometimes 2 or 3 times per election.
Oh.
Yeah.
You may not want to bring that up to our guest. Yeah.
I'm just kidding about that.
Yeah, he might have to have a question or two about that. But actually, hey, do you remember the first time that you did vote?
Ooh, I do remember.
When was it? And who'd you vote? I mean,
that would put me 2008, maybe?
Okay.
Would be the first major election that I remember voting at.
Presidential election?
Presidential election. I can't even remember who was in that election.
Because I think that was my first time voting as well. That would have been, Mitt Romney and Barack Obama.
Is that the Barack Obama?
I
I kind of feel like that was the
Cam, I just
election.
have to say, when do you want me to weigh in around here? Because I was going to say, that is Barack Obama versus John McCain.
Oh, my goodness.
Wow, Cameron.
Way off.
Just saying.
When was Mitt Romney then?
Never.
2012.
12.
Jeez.
And actually, Ott's experience is like, if people vote for president for their first election, they're more likely to be lifelong voters.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So you guys are fitting right in with the crowd.
This podcast is off to a great start already. I love it when Cameron has wrong information.
I was way off there. I appreciate you helping us out. And if you didn't know, this is the man who would know. This is the Secretary of State for the state of Idaho, Secretary Phil McGrane. We are pleased to have him here. He's going to help us out with maybe some hot shots here in a second.
Yeah.
That sounds good. But yeah, 2008, John McCain.
There you go. Yes,
Okay.
John McCain.
Yeah, that would have been the election. I remember standing in line for a while, and I remember thinking, like, man, this is like waiting on parts during harvest. This is taking forever. And as an 18 or 19-year-old, I was like, this has got to speed up a little bit. But I'll tell you what, both require patience, waiting for those parts, and also voting because sometimes the lines are long, but it is so important that you get out and vote. So most farmers that I know, they'll talk about rainfall totals all day long, but when it comes to ballots and voting, sometimes it's a little bit quieter, which is unfortunate because whether it's water policy, land use taxes, regulations, agriculture doesn't just grow in the field. It's shaped at the ballot box.
Amen.
And Mr. Phil McGrane knows that as well. So today we're going to be digging into the connection between elections, voting, and agriculture. But before we get too serious, Ott, we got to play some hot shots.
You bet.
Election edition. Are you ready?
I'm in.
And I may have Secretary McGrane also feed you some questions here as well.
Oh, man.
Does that sound okay?
Let's do this.
Let's do
Come on,
it.
Cam.
All right. First one. About what percentage of eligible voters typically turn out for a general election in the United States?
I feel like I'm going to choose a low number, and I'm going to be disappointed because I didn't choose low enough. I'm going to say 18%.
18% is incorrect, according to the information I have. Do you happen to know, Secretary?
The national average for a general election, I'm going to guess, I'm trying to think all 50 states, probably like 75%.
He's Right close, 65%.
Yeah,
65%.
That is way more
Higher?
than I would have ever given people credit for.
That's what I thought.
Congratulations,
too.
America. You're doing better than I expected.
I think they do better on presidential years than gubernatorial years. Right? So
Yeah.
we're balancing the two out.
I think so. All right. Question number 2. How often are federal elections held in the United States?
Federal elections. Man, I'm really showing my unknowledgeable amount. I think every 2 years somebody's up for election.
Correct. Yep. Every 2
thank
years.
goodness.
Yes.
That makes me feel slightly better.
Because it kind of offsets, right? With senators, it's 6 years.
Right.
Representatives, it's
Every 2 years.
2 years. Yeah. Good job, Ott.
Oh, thank goodness.
Okay. Next one. What's the term for voting before Election Day? What's that called?
I believe that you can have like an absentee ballot. Is that what you're looking for?
There's a term for it.
Man, I'm embarrassed.
When you vote.
Tell me, Cameron.
Early
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 voting.
voting.
Early voting.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
My mom's going to be, I'm going to tell her this podcast doesn't exist. She's going to be ashamed of me.
So early voting's great for folks in agriculture because when they get busy, they can just go get it done and not worry about standing in line if there is a line on Election Day. So, okay. Secretary, do you have a question you want to ask Ott? Is there one that comes to mind about voting or elections?
That's an interesting one. How many political parties do we have in Idaho?
Ooh, we're going to go with 2 political parties, and then there's an unaffiliated, which I don't know if that's a party.
No, we won't call it a party, but you're right. There's also libertarians and constitutionalists.
Oh,
There's
man.
four official parties here in the state of Idaho.
I want everybody to know that I slept so good last night because I didn't think that the Secretary of State of the state of Idaho would be asking me legislative questions. I will lay awake tonight in just a cold sweat knowing that I've embarrassed my family in front of the dozens of listeners. This is.
I'm pretty sure most of your listeners would say there's probably like one political party in the state of Idaho.
I
We
hope
might
that
get
they're
into
not.
that here in a little bit.
Right,
so
right.
I think you're doing fine.
Okay, good. Thank you, sir. That helps me. That'll help me sleep a little bit.
We won't let you forget it. Though.
Okay, good.
We won't let you forget it. Okay. Any other fun facts? Anything else you want to question-wise that comes to mind?
I'll give you. I get it. Why do we vote on Tuesday?
Ooh.
This is perfect for your listeners.
Well,
idea.
of course, you can't do anything on Mondays. There's football sometimes on Monday Night Football. Wednesdays.
You think the NFL is
Yeah, the
dictating?
NFL.
If probably
We
most
know that
Americans
they-
had their choice, the NFL would dictate when we vote.
Yeah.
I think you're probably right.
Wednesday's hump day, of course. You can't do anything then. Thursday Night Football also. Friday, college football. That leaves the weekend, and nobody wants to go vote on the weekend. So Tuesday, I feel like I've done a pretty good job narrowing it down to
There
Tuesday.
you go. All right.
We're riding this logic train.
Yeah,
all
do
the
you
way.
have
wait,
a-
he's not finished.
What's
saying,
your
so
reason?
My reason is in 1845, Congress set the first Tuesday following the first Monday in November as Election Day because Sunday's the Sabbath, and so you don't work on Sunday. And most voters had to travel to the county seat. If you picture, let's say you live up in Idaho County and you have to travel to Grangeville, Monday was your day to travel there. You'd vote on Tuesday and then head back, and you needed to be in time for market on Wednesday.
Wow.
There you go. So our agricultural roots all across the country tied in with voting.
That's fascinating.
Now you know.
I did not know that. That
There you go.
ties in very well what we're going to talk about today. So, okay, my last one. Who oversees elections in the state of Idaho?
Is it the Secretary of State by chance?
You got it.
Oh, thank
Hey,
goodness.
nice
job.
work. I was worried. I was getting nervous for you there.
Yeah. So that's the office responsible for ensuring elections are secure, accurate, and accessible. So, Ott, we'll just go ahead and give you your I voted sticker after that performance.
Okay.
And you're not getting a gold star. You're just going to get the I voted sticker.
Okay.
There. So, but we appreciate you playing. Good job. Appreciate the secretary helping out with that as well. So it's easy to think that your voice doesn't carry much weight. But when you look at how policies are shaped, it becomes pretty clear that, yes, your voice definitely does matter. So today we're going to be talking about why voting matters for agriculture and how elections actually work, and what folks in rural communities should know heading into election season. So let's head down the dirt road together and learn a little bit more about how the ballot box connects back to the farm right here on Dirt Road Discussions, where every bump tells a story. All right, I introduced our guest. We are so excited to have the Secretary of State for the state of Idaho, Mr. Phil McGrane, here with us. Secretary, thanks so much. Would you mind just starting off by telling us a little bit about your background? Did you always want to work in state government?
Yeah, thank you, Cam. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I think this is a great conversation for your audience. I would say ag groups are some of my favorite to get to talk to about elections and the changing demographics of our state, kind of what's going on, because obviously Idaho has some deep roots, especially with the ag community. And this is a very fast-growing state with a lot going on. My background tied into you guys. I'm a fourth-generation Idahoan. I feel like I'm dressed like a city slicker. I am a city slicker here right now. But for those who are in eastern Idaho and are listening, if anyone knows the Big Red Barn, that used to be my family's property for a long time. My grandfather was the accountant for the livestock auction
in
Idaho Falls for decades.
Uh-huh.
Yep. He was one of the founding members of the Bank of Commerce over there, helping fund agricultural entrepreneurs. Wow. And so definitely deep roots in the state. And I'm proud to serve the state of Idaho as Secretary of State. I've always had an inkling and an interest in politics, and I've spent my entire career helping make sure our elections run well. No
kidding. The Big Red Barn. Have you ever taken your family there?
Oh, you betcha.
Yeah.
My dad was thrown out of the top of that barn by his brothers. As a kid, he used to run cattle there. Yeah.
Awesome. That's a staple in that community. So very cool. All right. I'll kick us off here.
I want to kick us off. This episode is coming out pre the election process. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe start at when those legislators have said, hey, I want to run for office, and what they do up until that Tuesday when we vote?
Yeah, happy to. I think first and foremost is just there's an election on May 19th. I think that's the important that you guys know that, but I don't know that every listener knows that. One of the biggest challenges we see is people associate Election Day with November. We all think voting for president in November, voting for governor, but in a state like Idaho, especially with the makeup of our state, the May primary really is one of the biggest elections. Most races will be determined on May 19th, and so it's really important for people to be engaged in the process. I'm sure we'll talk about that a bit more. But for those of us who work in the space, I was just over in Gooding earlier this morning visiting their elections office, and they've been working for months now to gear up for this election. Actually, people in Idaho have been voting for the last month leading up to the election. As you mentioned, absentee voting is underway. People have been requesting it. Early voting is just now starting to take place. And so if you want to vote in advance Election Day, say you're going to be working all day and you just can't get away from the farm, this is a good chance to get in, go to your county seat, vote early. But from the candidate filing that happened right at the end of February, so all the candidates filed, we verify all their information. And from there, just like any other big operation, there's a lot of logistics involved. When we think of elections, a lot of people think about democracy and the republic and just our constitutional rights. From the election administrator side, it's a giant logistics operation. I always compare, so here we are in Ada County. Ada County Elections is the largest event planning operation in the state of Idaho. They're planning an event just like anybody else would. They're just inviting 300,000 of their closest friends. Wow. And when you think about that, you have to have all the people trained, all the supplies there, have all the ballots printed and ready. And so all of our peers across the state, all the 44 county clerks, are working really hard right now, gearing up to have everything in place for the polls to be open May 19th, to get the ballots counted quickly and get the results out to the public.
Wow. Yeah, only 300,000 people, right?
Yeah, only.
Small undertaking.
It's like a backyard barbecue.
Yeah, exactly. We just were talking to someone about sweet corn, so
hey,
bring
there you
the
go.
Sweet corn to the barbecue. We'll have a good time. So, Secretary, we'll touch more kind of on the logistics side of stuff here in a minute, but you mentioned that you have always been interested in politics, but you started off as a county clerk, correct?
I was a county clerk, but even well before that, my career in elections actually started right after If anybody remembers, you might not, but the hanging Chad in Florida and the 2000 election, Bush v. Gore, the infamous election. So I've actually counted punch card ballots. I was an election specialist in Ada County right out of college. And so it was right after that, implementing a lot of changes. And I've spent my career from there doing a bunch of different work. I was chief deputy of the clerk's office, then clerk, and now obviously serve as secretary and work with all my peers, the clerks across the state, helping make sure Idaho's elections it's easy to vote, that they're secure and they're accurate.
Okay, so a lot of history there.
Yeah.
I do remember
I'm an elections nerd.
Yeah. And I know that you've compiled a bunch of data as far as how Idaho votes and things like that. And I'm hoping to jump into that as well. But you do have an extensive background with elections and with government, which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks.
I don't think you become Secretary of State without, doing a little work on the bottom end.
Not unless
you
you're odd,
gotta work
right?
your way up, right?
Not unless you're odd and you're nailing out shots all the time. That'll get you right to the top. So.
I think your
I think
listeners
you're
are
safe from me.
are people who can appreciate just having boots on the ground, having actually, worked in the fields, done some of the hard work. I've done that in my own space. So that's what's fun when I visit election offices around the state. Being able to actually talk shop with the people who do the work makes a big difference when you have someone, a state official, and people don't necessarily associate with the ability to get into the equipment that's being used and how it actually works. And so I don't matter what profession it is, I think anybody can appreciate that.
Yeah, you bet.
You mentioned 300,000 individuals invited to the party. That's a lot. That's a lot of individuals here in the state of Idaho. And it's growing.
Let me clarify, that's just Ada County. We have over 1 million registered voters in the state of Idaho. So across all 44 counties, there's a lot more. So we're throwing a bigger party when it comes to these statewide elections that are happening this year. So
I heard that number and I was like, that math is terrible. Like, you guys need to do some better math. But that makes sense if it's only Ada County.
It's only Ada County.
Can you talk a little bit about the growth since, the last major election 4 years or, a couple years ago? Idaho's grown tremendously and continues to grow. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on for Idaho?
I think this is one of the most interesting things is, and for your listeners, it really is a big thing. Like I mentioned, I love going to talk to the cattlemen, the potato growers, the wheat growers. Paul Arrington and I'll be with the water users coming up here in about a month. And he and I love to kind of piggyback on each other. Obviously, he usually is talking about water and some of the substantive issues that you guys weigh in. But when you look at policy, just the changing demographics of our state, Idaho is one of, if not the fastest growing state. And actually, when you look at some of the other fast growing states, so for example, Florida has been exploding as well, but Florida has died down. Like, people are not moving there at the same rate, whereas Idaho has not. We're seeing huge growth. And one of the things I like to share is, if you work on the ranch, you don't necessarily know who's coming. All you know and you hear is Californians are coming to Idaho. And it's true. Californians are coming out. By overwhelmingly, the largest group of people coming are Californians, followed by Washingtonians, Oregonians. As Governor Little likes to say, the cows are coming, and a few other folks. One of the most interesting things from our office, though, over the last couple of years is we collect a lot of information when people register to vote. And so we've looked at who are the people that are moving here. Not just the numbers of them and where they're coming from, but what is the makeup of the age, other demographics. And one of the big ones that stands out is politics. Of the 49 other states, it is a majority of Republicans moving to Idaho from all 49 states. When we first launched the information, Vermont was the one holdout, and that was because they literally had one more Democrat than Republican move to Idaho. But since then, even Vermont has joined the fold. So the people are moving here. When I say Californians are coming, people picture blue-haired hippies. Mm-hmm. That's not who's moving to Idaho. It's disaffected Republicans that are moving, and moving in droves. And I think one of the biggest things, and I think great for us to talk about, is what does that mean for our state? Like, yes, they're conservative. Yes, they're moving here because of voting and our values, our quality of life. But I will say their perceptions and their priorities are different than ours. They're not coming here to talk about the rainfall today, right? And so what does that mean is we try to merge the cultures of, like, my grandfather down at the livestock auction with the Californian from Orange County who moves up here, and we're kind of coming together. And you see that happening here at the State House.
Yeah. And that's what I alluded to earlier, is that data that you've collected. So Idaho, of course, is a red state, but based off of the data you've gathered, it's getting redder.
It's a red state getting redder. Yeah, like as people are moving in, I hear about it all the time, fear or rhetoric saying, oh no, a blue wave is coming. No, a red wave is coming and coming fast. Just in the time that I've been secretary, so we had 58% registered Republicans when I took office. We are now up to 62% registered Republicans in the state. So going back to our trivia question, right? That's why a lot of people would say this is a one-party state. I know there are people here in Boise who might disagree, but when you look at the numbers, so we have right now 62% registered Republican compared to 12% registered Democrats, with 25% roughly registered as unaffiliated, so not a member of a party. And so that means a lot of red voting, but again, it's changing in terms of who's influencing things at the Capitol and what's going on. That's where this convergence is happening.
Yeah.
I believe you mentioned this at a Farm Bureau convention. The city of Star was kind of an outlier as well, of like, here's where individuals are moving.
It's the City of Eagle.
City of Eagle.
I'll jump on it. Because this is a fascinating story. For those who aren't familiar, Eagle, Idaho, it's a small suburb right outside the Boise area, kind of Boise Meridian. I grew up here in the Boise area. I was born in Pocatello and grew up here in Boise. And I don't ever remember going to Eagle ever. Like, I just turned at the stinker station to go towards McCall on Highway 55. Mm-hmm. Since then, Eagle has grown a lot. And one of the really interesting things is after we shared some of our data, the Los Angeles Times did a feature story on Eagle, Idaho. And I think that's the part that you remember.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think all of us should wonder, like, why would the LA Times care about little old Eagle, Idaho? And it was about the Eagle mayor's race in 2023. And the reason was they had done their own information gathering, and one of the things they looked at was California's pension program, CalPERS. So it's kind of like Percy here in Idaho, but it's the pension for public workers in California. And they looked at where the distribution checks are going to. Majority go to the state of California. People retire where they worked. But outside of that, they looked everywhere else in the nation. And the 83616 zip code, Eagle, Idaho, is the #1 recipient of California public dollars in the United States.
Wow.
And it's because people are gravitating to Idaho. Now you have whole developments that are just developments of Californians. The runoff election in 2023 for the mayor's race was 2 former Californians. The Eagle City Council now has 1 native Idahoan on it. The rest are California transplants. And if you get to see Speaker Mike Moyle, you can give him a hard time. Star's right next door. Now, if you want to buy a Bentley, a Rolls Royce, you can do it at the British Royal Motor Cars in Star, Idaho. And I don't know that many of your listeners ever pictured Star being the place to get your Bentley, but it is now, because we got a few people moving here, and I guess a couple of them want, their Lamborghinis, Ferraris, and Bentleys using some of their pension money.
That's wild.
Isn't it wild?
That's wild. Oh, man. Did you take a note of that when you buy your next Bentley?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
That's where I got my last one. So
Todd's getting ready to leave.
I'll continue to get my...
So, not only that, but there's rats from California coming to
Yes, one of the biggest issues of this legislative session was, what are we going to do about the rats? Because not only did they bring their Bentley dealership, they also brought their rats with them, and we don't know what to do with these rodents, right? This isn't an issue Idaho has ever dealt with before.
Yeah.
And it is a reflection of just the people moving here. And one of the interesting things, I mentioned Paul Arrington, so we spoke a couple years ago in terms of the legislative session. He was giving his legislative update, which you guys can probably appreciate, probably have heard him speak. He was talking about all the issues facing the ag community, and that was the year of the water call over in eastern Idaho, and so people were up in arms about water. And you guys know this all too well, how important water is to our state, especially to our ag community. And the big issue that session was where to place library books. And it was, do you put the somewhat explicit content on the top shelf, or do you put it in the back of the library? What do you do with it? Mm-hmm. And that is the debate that was happening in the State House while you had people over in eastern Idaho worried about their crops that they'd already planted, and would they have enough water to feed them? Mm-hmm. And so one of the things I see this convergence, and it really matters to remember, is that the people moving here are Republican. There's no two ways about it. So they voted for Donald Trump. People here voted for Donald Trump. And so on that level, we're the same. And that's part of what drew people to the state, is they look at our values, our conservative record, whatnot. The challenge is their priorities are different. You'll see a lot more social issues being highlighted versus Idaho has very libertarian roots in the sense of just most farmers just want to be left alone. Mm-hmm. They're happy to help their neighbor, but if the government stays out of their business, it's probably best. If the government stays out of their pocketbook, that's even better, mm-hmm. right? And that's kind of the historic Idahoan. But now you're seeing a lot more policy debates, and it's changing. And once I was talking, actually Zach and I were at a track meet recently talking about Farm Bureau and some of the ag all-stars being part of the legislature. Consistently, there are less ag all-stars in the legislature. And what once was ag kind of drove politics in Idaho. As more people are moving in, it's still conservatives, but it's not as ag focused or as ag friendly as it once was. And that is part of that convergence, is not everyone has a tie. I see it when I travel around the state and I'm listening to speakers talk at a Lincoln Day or some other event. It used to be everyone started a speech talking about how they moved pipe when they grew up as kids. Mm-hmm. Less and less, or now you don't even see the audience. They're like, why would you move pipe? What are the pipes for? Right? My favorite line I always love to share is, when you're talking to the potato growers or the cattlemen, for example, some people are like, why do we need these guys? We've got Albertsons. And I think you guys know better than just about anybody. Oh no, there's a whole economy and an ecosystem here in our state that drives all of this. And so it's not just about voting, but it's about deciding the direction of our state is kind of at play as we go. And ag is still huge. Yeah. I think that's something that I get to see, but is really lost. When you look at the Simplots, the Chobanis, the Lamb Westons, I mean, those are just some of the big ag groups, but all the farmers who feed into that, it is massive amounts of money. It's lots of people's livelihoods. And I get to sit at the center of all this in terms of just the political battles, but also looking at what's happening culturally in our state as we kind of see all these people come in.
Yeah. Great thoughts. And I just want to pick your brain. How do you see that all playing out? Like, we're all in the sandbox, right? In your vision of things, like, how do we make it all work? Because right now I think with a lot of the people that we work with in rural communities, maybe they feel a little disconnected from Boise or with Ada County because it's just not where they're at or where they're from or whatever it is. But how do we square whatever circle that is, and how do you
I think one of the ways I think that we do it, and I think it's important for your listeners and the members of the Farm Bureau, is voting. Go back to where we started. Participate. One of the hardest things is just getting people to show up. There's tons of polling data nationally, and the number one reason that people don't vote is they're too busy. I always like to say, when you look at a presidential election, like, people will take the time to get off their horse or get off their tractor to go vote for president. But when it comes to like their local legislators, their county officials or others, sometimes, and you guys alluded to it in the early part, is trying to encourage people to early vote because unfortunately, the cows need fed. Yeah. And it's just hard to make that time in your routine, especially on a Tuesday. And we see it, and it doesn't matter whether you're on a farm or you're here in Boise. It's just like, I always say, who's going to not go to soccer practice so they can make sure to go vote, right? And there are lots of reasons, but being able to participate in that process. One of the interesting things that for those who watch some of the politics here in Boise, growth is happening. People are moving here. I've already talked about that in terms of some of the demographic changes. One of those with it is the urban areas are becoming larger. The Treasure Valley is growing much faster than the rest of the state. And yes, there are other pockets like up near Coeur d'Alene and Hayden. Those areas are growing. Magic Valley is growing a bit, but still, no matter what, the Treasure Valley is growing faster. And in the politics world, we're going to see this come to a head right after 2030. So in 2030, we'll do the national census, we'll count heads, and then we reassign the congressional districts. And it's almost certain that Idaho will get a third congressional seat. And in a community like your listeners, it's like, oh, who gets to control that or what? And the Treasure Valley is going to be the center of attention as we have that debate. Now, what's interesting is historically and arguably still today, the ag community has an outsized influence in the Capitol building. And that's because within the Treasure Valley, they can't get along. So Mike Moyle, Speaker Moyle, he represents kind of the star over into Nampa area a little bit. And he's not very far from Melissa Wintrow, who represents downtown Boise. They live really close together, but their politics couldn't be further apart. And so the Treasure Valley, you have some of the strongest Democratic districts and some of the reddest conservative districts, but they are always at war with each other. And if you look at Ada County in particular, you can almost draw a line right down the middle of Ada County between the blue side and the red side. Right. So what that does is that actually empowers the rest of the state. Rural Idaho sends in representatives who can get along, and somebody from Rigby has no problem getting along with somebody from Burley because their issues aren't that dissimilar. And so they can come together. What's more interesting, though, is historically those seats have been people that were tied to agriculture because their families, either they were in it themselves, they were ranchers or farmers, if you're up north, they're loggers. But now we're seeing some of those areas. The Magic Valley is a great example where you don't actually have ag advocates in the realm. They come from other walks of life. And so you see some of those issues changing. That's where those ag all-stars in the legislature are changing. And the policy debates are changing with them. And so I think one of the hard things is, for the ag community is just being seen. I remember meeting with Terry West, and I think you guys can fact check me here. I think we export about 500 pounds of cheese per capita in the state of Idaho. That's a boatload of cheese. That's more than a boatload of cheese. That's a lot of cheese. That's a big part of our economy, right? And if you went down the street here in Boise, most people have no idea that we are exporting that much dairy, let alone all the other dairy that we're doing.
Right. Nationally, I think Idaho was third in the nation as far as milk and cheese production, right? Which people...
And it's our most important commodity. Like, of all ag commodities, dairy is huge. And you would ask anybody and they'd think, well, potatoes. Are clearly the winner. But
I'm pretty sure cattlemen feel like they're the winners right now. That's
they're
what I'm
doing
hearing
all
from
right.
everybody.
Every dairy cow is a feeder cow at some point.
But the same thing, I was in Taiwan last summer. I got to take a trip to Taiwan with a group of Secretaries of State, and it was awesome being from Idaho, of the Secretaries of State, and I was with a bunch of different states. I was like a celebrity, and it was because we export a lot of wheat. And our trade relationship with Taiwan is huge because we're providing a ton of the food that is headed over. The same thing, beef was a big factor when I was over there, and it was kind of neat to see, like, it was because of our ties to the ag that really I stood out way heads and tails over my peers, much bigger states, but because of the relationships we have and the influence.
I'll throw out one more statistic that I think I've heard. 105 legislators. I heard 15 of them have direct ties to agriculture these days. And a decade ago, it was like 30 that were directly tied into it. So, if we keep doing that every decade, pretty soon we'll be at 1 or 2. And we at the Farm Bureau really encourage anybody that's a farmer and rancher to come and be part of the legislative process because we need them to continue being there. I heard it. When I first started with the Farm Bureau, it's way easier to have somebody vote your way if they already feel that way than to convince them, like, no, this is why agriculture is important. Like, you don't want to try and convince somebody that's a dentist that, hey, ag is important here in, southeastern Idaho. You want to, have that farmer or rancher and say, hey, you know just as well as anybody else that agriculture is important to the state.
Well, and I think a big part of that too is, yes, you definitely need people to step up and serve. And I honestly think in all public life, we need people willing to serve their communities, to take on the roles, to be on their school board, to be in their city council, to serve in the legislature. Obviously, Governor Little has very strong ties, as does Lieutenant Governor Bedke, to the ag community. But I think that's a trend that's it's arriving at a horizon in terms of just the demographics. And so bringing that up and having people in the space. But one of the big things is just voting. You don't just have to serve. You could just ask the people who represent you, how are they on the things that matter to you? And I think, I want to go back to those Californians that are moving in. Something I think it's important for listeners just to reflect on is those of us who grew up here and know this state, we feel like things are pretty good. Like, we are blessed to live in Idaho. I truly believe that to my core. It's why I'm here. It's why my kids are here. We're used to it being this way. There's a quality of life, and we're pretty content. And so when things are going reasonably well, we're focused on our families, we're focused on our businesses. You compare that to the person who, let's say they were part of an ag family in Orange County, California. Remember, Orange County was named because of the orange groves, right? It's the home of former Republican Governor Ronald Reagan, right? And that community just changed over time and progressively became different focus, different people. And what happens is you get to a point where it's no longer they don't belong here, it's I don't belong here. And so we're seeing people pack up their families, look around, and find someplace else to move to and to live. And Idaho is the place they've chosen. So they're coming here. But often politics is one of the driving forces. And anybody watching the news right now, so Virginia just recently voted on redistricting the state of Virginia. But last November, the state of California had on their ballot to redistrict California. So just imagine the Californians who lived in Kevin McCarthy's congressional district. And all of a sudden, just by Gavin Newsom putting it on the ballot, you no longer have a Republican representing you. It's been a lifeline. Now they're going to give you a Democrat, and you're just like, all right, that's the final straw.
Yeah.
I'm out. Peace out.
Yeah.
So you pack up your family, you move to Idaho, and when you get here, you're fired up. What you know, you don't know as much about the state. You know you're glad to be here. You know the values are. But what you know is you don't want it to become where you just came from. And so you're fired up, and so you show up and vote. You get involved. You step up to serve on the school board. And what I think is catching a lot of us, especially your listeners, off guard is you're like, well, I thought things were good. And all of a sudden you have these people coming in ready to pounce on it. And part of it is meeting them there, welcoming them, letting them acclimate. One of my favorite phrases I've heard is, don't change Idaho, let Idaho change you. Yeah. And it is like, hey, take a deep breath. We're good here. What can we do together to keep the quality of life that we have all enjoyed?
Yeah, that's great thoughts. Great advice there for sure. What are we not asking so far? Anything you want to cover?
An interesting part that ties into all this, and if you see it, it really depends on where you live in the state, is just money and politics. So part of my role is overseeing the voting process and making sure Idahoans have the chance to vote and that they can have confidence. And no, Ott has not voted multiple times. Me and my peers have made sure of it. We've got a lot of safety systems in check. But the other part is just the influence. One of the things we saw in the 2024 legislative cycle was just a huge increase of out-of-state money, right? And so just money pouring in. And we track and we make sure to make all that information public. But we saw these groups playing a lot more. So school choice was a big topic. There was a lot of money there. I was joking with you guys beforehand about glyphosate. I'm going to get it wrong, right? There's billboards in some parts of our state that say stand up for glyphosate. Oddly, the largest spending lobbying group in the state of Idaho was the Modern Ag Alliance advocating for glyphosate. Who would have ever guessed? They spent about $600,000 influencing legislators during the 2025 session.
Wow.
And it was, who knew, right? Huh. But you have all this other money coming in. And I think one of the big things is Idaho is now on the map. I think we've been comfortable sitting there, not too much attention. But when you start having people move in, they tell other people. And so we're getting this attention, whether it's from Washington, D.C. or California or Texas, coming in and playing a bigger part in our state. And we're just not used to that. And unfortunately, or fortunately, it's a little of both, is Idaho's a pretty cheap date. The amount of money you spend in Florida and Texas and D.C. and California goes a lot further in the state of Idaho. And that's not just true when it comes to housing and everything else. That's also true in politics. And what I'm seeing is some of these races are getting more expensive. At the statewide level, all of the races are getting a lot more expensive. It's getting harder for people to step up and to get in, and it's requiring more support. And I will say that there are groups in the state that have gathered together. I can say in the ag community, there are efforts here locally to get more engaged, not just to get members like the Farm Bureau getting members out to vote, but other ag groups trying to get people involved in the process. And hopefully just bringing attention to some of this makes people a little more aware, like, showing up isn't just a civic duty and, good to engage in your community. It's actually having a big impact on our livelihoods, and we probably need to have a say in the process.
Yeah. And go ahead.
I'll piggyback on that. PAC. PAC is an acronym for Political Action Committee.
Yep.
Idaho has a lot of them that they, other organizations can put money behind the candidates that they feel like will help their members, or, citizens can donate to a candidate. But one thing that you mentioned in a previous conference was how if you see derogatory information about a candidate, a lot of that comes from out of state. And if you see positive information about a candidate, a lot of that it's coming from, Idaho citizens or Idaho PACs. Can you talk a little bit about that?
You're right. You're exactly right. I think, one of the things, kind of some of the information I shared. So in the 2024 legislative election, so the legislative process, this is state legislature, about $17 million was spent in the state of Idaho. And so we have 35 legislative districts, 3 people represent each of those districts, 1 senator, 2 House members. So $17 million is a lot of money. I think all of us can think of things we could do with $17 million. Yeah. One of the things is, of that, about $7.6 million was money given to candidates directly. So it's when people donate to their local legislator, it was that direct donations. But beyond that was the PACs, the political action committees. These are those groups that when you go open your mailbox right before the election, you have all these flyers, or you get on your Facebook feed and you keep seeing a bunch of stuff. And it's true, the in-state PACs generally are supporting candidates. And when you see those really nasty negative attack ads, the majority of that money is coming from out of state. And it's probably no surprise. Like, if you're sitting in Texas, you don't have any problem picking on somebody here in Idaho. And you don't really know him. One of my favorite stories is former pro tem Chuck Winder. He lost his race. It was a very expensive race in the last cycle. But at one point, KTVB did a story. They were chasing the money. Right? Our office reports where it comes from, how it goes. And they chased it down to the fondue king of South Carolina, this guy who owns a bunch of melting pots. And they asked him, like, what do you have against Chuck Winder? And he's like, I've never heard of him. Sounds like a nice guy. And it was really, he just gave a lot of money to this group that had weighed in on where things are headed. And we are the ones paying the price of that engagement. And so I'm hopeful. It is interesting to see this cycle. It's looking a little different in terms of the spending, but we're here in the final stretch of the primary election. This is where a lot of that money in these final weeks, we're going to see it come in. I think one of the areas for your members to watch this election is the Magic Valley, obviously big in the agricultural community, but also one of the more intense areas. I think both Magic Valley and then over in southeastern Idaho are going to be 2 of the places really to watch in terms of very competitive elections. That money that you were talking about, that's where we'll see a lot of these ads on both sides, supporting candidates, opposing candidates, all directions. It's not one group or another. It's just going to be a lot of money. And we're expecting to see some of the most expensive races we've ever seen as a state this cycle.
I hear that a lot as far as those mailers and things, and people, get tired of that information. But is that just the reality of the game that's played? Is we're going to always be dealing with out-of-state money, or is there steps legislatively that can be done to address maybe that issue?
It's one of the issues I've been working on in the legislature. I mean, the tough thing is the United States Supreme Court has determined that money is a form of free speech. And so going back to our First Amendment right in the United States Constitution, you're always going to have some degree of it, so we're not going to stop the flow. Some of it is just us waking up in our own engagement. I think, this year is the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. We're going to celebrate that. I think an important part of the Declaration of Independence is self-governance. Like, we get to choose our leaders for ourselves. This is a republic. Part of that is us taking advantage of the privileges that they fought for and determining our future. And so hopefully as Idahoans get more engaged, we'll see higher turnout. We were talking about it earlier. You were asking, in our trivia, just the turnout numbers. Well, you were focused on the November election. Unfortunately, the primary election has considerably less turnout, even though it has a bigger impact on the final outcomes than the November election does. So I'm trying to get the word out. I know you guys are trying to get the word out. Just trying to get people to pay a little more attention, be a little bit more engaged. Beyond that, in terms of the money, what I'm trying to do is lead efforts to just add more transparency, more disclosure, more awareness. So at the very least, when you get that mail, you know who it's coming from, where it's coming from, that the media, podcasts like this can shed more light in terms of who's influencing who for what reason. Obviously, economics always plays a part in this. It is a little bit, I will say, for me, I'm kind of like the referee in a giant sporting event. I will say I love this stuff. So as you guys already know, you've seen me talk about it. I love getting engaged in the numbers and what's going on. But at the same time, I never lose sight of the fact that this still kind of impacts people's daily lives. And, if it's okay, one thing I'd love to share, just a story about, one of the biggest things I always hear, and I try to talk about a lot, is, does your vote count? Does it matter?
Yeah.
I get that a lot. And I think listeners can probably relate. Like, well, the state's going to vote this way anyway, so what difference does it make? And I love your introduction. I can't remember the line, but as you're talking about the dirt road, right, kind of dodging the potholes along the way, one of my favorite lines to talk about is when you think of government, governments should really be behind the scenes. Like, you shouldn't have to think about government. I really think the best form of government is one you don't notice. And so when you're driving down the road, you shouldn't be thinking about the government that put it there. You should be thinking about your destination and what you're going to be doing. But if you hit a pothole, government's not doing enough. And if you hit a speed bump, government's doing too much. and I share that because in 2020, the 2020 election gets a lot of attention for a lot of reasons. But one of the key things in 2020 here locally is the Ada County Highway District had a race for commissioner that was determined by 2 votes. Wow. 2 votes out of 40,000 ballots cast. That's less than 0.005% difference. Razor thin. Man. And any candidate can find 2 people who didn't vote that day. Heck, we might have listeners where there were one of those 2 people in a vote. But I can tell you, I have yet to find anybody who has not complained about ACHD. Everybody has thoughts when it comes to roads. And one of the most fascinating things about the election wasn't just that how close it was. And I'm happy to say our election system works. We did a very contentious recount, went to court. The results stood, so that the system works. But most shockingly, it's just both how close it was and how easy it would be to determine that race. But also when we did that recount, of the 40,000 ballots cast that day, 10,000 people skipped that race.
Oh, wow. They just didn't fill it out.
They just didn't fill it out. They voted for president. Maybe they voted for Congress, but they just didn't go down because they didn't know. Yeah. And yet, how many people haven't groused about the roads? Yeah. Whether it's the dirt roads or the paved roads, we're all grousing about the roads, or there's too many cars on them, right? And so I think this is one of those really good examples. As anyone listening, hopefully this motivates you to get up, get involved, and tell other people, quit grousing. Just show up and make sure you're deciding who's going to be elected and who's going to lead us.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that, because that was what I was thinking of. Is I hear that quite a bit. The outcome's already determined, right? Why voice doesn't matter, but absolutely it doesn't. It makes me think back to 2 years ago, the election for one of the House seats in Bingham.
Yes, in Butte and Bingham County. I was there for the recount. 4 votes is what it was determined by. Yes. Yeah. Crazy. Representative Ben Furman versus Representative Julianne Young. They're at a rematch, so that's another race to watch for anybody who's looking for something to pay attention to. Yeah. But yes, it matters.
Yeah. All right, Secretary, occasionally on the podcast, we do a lightning round, which is always a lot of fun. So we're going to rapid fire you some questions, and we'll see where you're at on a few things.
Okay.
All right. First one, office supply item that you use in your office that you go through it more than anything else. What's an office?
Blue pens.
Blue pens. Why blue pens?
I sign a lot of proclamations. Anything the governor signs, I sign, and we're always chasing down pens.
Okay.
Do you have nightmares about hanging chads?
I love elections. I do not have nightmares about hanging chads.
Are you an early voter or day of voter?
Because I'm in elected office, I'm a day of voter. But early voting is great. I'm a big advocate for early voting.
Okay.
The stickers that you receive at voting, can you tell me who designed those or what's going on with stickers this year?
What's really cool is this year we have a custom I Voted sticker to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So, and I've got Chelsea Caratini, our communications director, design that sticker.
Wow. Okay. What's your go-to snack on election day when things are crazy?
On election, I would say when you started, I was going to say my Dr. Pepper Cherry Zero. My staff will say I have like 7 of them a day. So it keeps me fueled. My go-to snack is hot tamales, but I've brought in some red, white, and blue Mike and Ike's most recently for the team to celebrate. Like, God bless America.
That's right.
Very patriotic of you.
God bless America with some red, white, and blue Mike and Ike's.
Is voter engagement up currently versus a decade ago, or down?
It ebbs and flows. It's probably down slightly, unfortunately. I think demographic, trying to get young people involved has always been a challenge.
What's your one word to describe Idaho voters?
I'll just say blessed. I think we're all blessed to be Idahoans.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to a percentage you threw out. 58% Republican at one point and 62% currently. When was the 58%? Like, how long between those two stats?
3 years.
Wow.
I know. So not even very much. That is and statistically, when we're talking 1 million plus people, that is a seismic shift.
What's the wildest story you've seen at a polling station? Something you've experienced?
Unfortunately, my favorite to share, and this might be a little longer than your lightning round, but is absentee ballots. I always say when we send absentee ballots, we send them out into the wild, and some of them look like they came back from the wild. So I've gotten gummy bears in the ballots a couple of times. I get money in the ballots, and the most annoying one ever was a voter who, instead of marking the boxes with a pen, they took an X-Acto knife and cut out each of their votes.
Who knew?
Please don't do that.
Don't do
I think
that.
I know that guy.
Don't
Was
do
that?
If you want your vote to count, don't do that.
Don't do it.
All right, my final question. Write-ins. Has a write-in person ever won an election?
Yeah, we actually had one for county office. Rural Idaho, they're more successful than they are in others. So even recently, I think we had a county sheriff's race just last cycle that was determined with a write-in candidate winning. I think more interestingly, though, if I think back to I think it was the 2020 presidential election, is lots of people write in a lot of things. It's like, and so there's way more people. And I believe that year, remember, Mitt Romney was not on the ballot, but I'm pretty sure he got more votes than 4 or 5 of the other presidential candidates on the ballot. We actually go through and read every single write-in, even when people vote for can of corn or Daffy Duck. They don't get votes, but we do read them.
How many kids do you have?
I have 3 kids.
3 kids. What do you do outside of nerding out on election stuff?
A couple of things. I love being outdoors. The Sawtooth Mountains are my getaway, and taking my kids to go mountain biking or to go out on the canoe and fishing. That's like my go-to place. And beyond that, especially for your listeners, you wouldn't know it, but I'm a nationally award-winning competitive pitmaster. I have traveled the country with my smoker in tow, and so I can cook a mean brisket. So if anybody has any briskets that they feel like, could use some special treatment, my Secretary of Steak rub is exactly what it needs.
We know a few people who probably have a brisket.
I bet you probably do. That's
May
why I mentioned
20th.
it.
Party at Phil's
you
house.
go.
We'll be there to celebrate.
Is that your favorite thing to smoke then? Is a brisket or pork butt or?
So awards. So this is going back a few years. In 2013, I was 18th in the nation overall in the Sam's Club National Barbecue Tour and 3rd in the nation in pulled pork.
Wow.
Pulled pork is where I've had my best success. But I love a mean tri-tip. I love brisket, but brisket takes hours. Tri-tip tastes pretty much the same, just doesn't take quite the same work.
Mm-hmm.
Who knew?
Maybe we'll have to come back. We can just talk
Awesome.
brisket and meat, and I can tell you the difference between fancy chicken and fancy beef. And
Let's do it.
yeah, I love it.
Awesome. Well, you survived the lightning round.
All right.
Great job. We learned some unique facts that you wouldn't know about.
I don't look like a competitive pitmaster, but I can smoke a mean brisket.
All right, Secretary. So as we start to wrap up here, you mentioned 2020 with the election. And I think of course, the presidential elections always get the most press. And since then, there's always been that thought about elections being fair and free. And I've heard that concern that maybe elections are rigged. But your job is to ensure that elections are smooth and transparent. What can you say to just make sure people, have trust in our election process? Because especially here in Idaho, like we we have it down. Like, we know what we're doing thanks to some of your efforts. So could you touch more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. We really are blessed to be in Idaho, and we have a great election system. To the point that a year ago, I was asked to testify before Congress about the success that Idaho is having in its elections and how can that be shared with other states across the country. And I think that's a huge compliment for a small state like Idaho.
Yeah.
It certainly was a privilege for me. And but beyond that, I will say, even across the country, since that election, we mentioned the hanging Chad into 2000, we continue to get better. There are so many dedicated professionals at the ground level. So you have our county clerks, and we've got amazing county clerks throughout the state working really hard. Beyond that, we have poll workers. Like, anybody who's really curious about the system, serve as a poll worker. You get to see firsthand the checks and balances and all the safeguards that are in place. And it's worth noting, as we get ready for the May 19th election, it takes about 5,000 poll workers across the state of Idaho willing to serve their community and their neighbors in order for all of us to be able to vote. On that, it's still one of those, going back to, you think of ag in the old way, it's like people just pitching in, right? Willing to serve and to help. We've done a lot to safeguard our systems, whether that's testing and certifying equipment, double checking things. One of the things our office is getting ready for is to do audits after the election. We actually send teams of people to the counties. We randomly select them and randomly select precincts that we hand count all of the votes to compare them to what the county said were the results. And I'm happy to report that we continue to show the system works, that the votes add up the way they're supposed to add up. And so there's a lot of great systems. And I'll just wrap it up. In 2024, there was a lot of focus. There will be here in the midterms this year. I think one of the things I'm proud is just to be an Idahoan is before the presidential election, all 44 county clerks, along with me, signed a letter. It was our commitment to Idaho voters, highlighting our 12 principles of elections. And it's everything from making voting easy, making sure voting is secure, and making sure that it's accurate. And I think that's what Idahoans expect. And the fact that we can have all counties working together to that end, that doesn't happen everywhere else. That is partly of the Idaho story. And I think we're blessed to live in Idaho. I think we're blessed to live in the United States of America. And I think, it's easy when you travel around. When I was in Taiwan last summer, it's easy for us to take some of these rights that we have, these privileges as Americans, for granted. And you don't have to look that far around the world. Not everybody is as blessed as we are when it comes to the ability to vote and determine who's going to lead our country.
Amen. Yeah.
Bill, on the Dirt Road Discussion podcast, we like to look down the road. What is your hope? Again, this episode comes out, I believe, on the 12th. Votes on the 19th. What is your hope for the 19th to try and make sure everybody gets there? Not who's going to win.
Right.
I don't want to paint you in a corner there, but what's your hope there?
No, I hope that, I hope we have great turnout. And I hope that everybody who votes has confidence that, there's a lot of trust. One of the things I always talk to my staff and my team about is our role is to build trust in government. And right now that's a big lift. When I say that, it's not trust in our office or trust in the clerk's offices. When you stick your ballot in the ballot box, your confidence in your legislator, your confidence in your mayor, your confidence in governor is all based upon your faith that when those votes were counted, it's an accurate reflection of the community will. Whether you won or lost doesn't really matter. You're just like, dang it, I guess I got to try harder next time, right? I think that being a part of that system is a huge blessing and an honor. And you can tell I'm very passionate about this work. I think it's important. And so as we look towards the future, I'm hopeful that Idahoans continue to have great confidence in our elections and feel like they're really part of this process.
Awesome. Well, once again, we have been joined by the Secretary of State for the state of Idaho, Secretary Phil McGrane. Secretary, thank you so much for all the work that you do to ensure that our elections are free and fair. And we are looking forward to a good turnout on May 19th.
Yes.
So for resources to maybe go look at a sample ballot, where can listeners go?
I can't believe it's taken me this long to mention it. Usually I'm like on repeat, but thank you, Cam. Thank you all for just having me. I think it's a privilege. The best resource for sure, it doesn't matter what part of Idaho you live in, is voteidaho.gov. That's the official page for voting throughout the state. If you need to register or update your registration, you can. If you need to find your polling place, request an absentee ballot, or as you noted, Cam, if you want to see what you're going to be voting on because you don't know, you can see a personalized personalized sample. You can see the actual ballot you will vote, all of the candidates listed, what races are going to appear, so that you can, do your research, get a little more information before you head to the polls. Not only trust those pack mailers that are coming in your inbox, but actually be able to look up a little bit more before you head to the polls. So you don't have to just vote the top of the ticket. You can vote all the way down the ballot.
Yeah. And your vote does matter. So get out and vote. We invite you to do that on May 19th. And once again, Secretary, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll get together next time. We'll talk some cuts of meat and
all right,
have some fun.
It.
So, all right, with that, we'll wrap up another episode of Dirt Road Discussions, and we'll see you down the road.